Hi, hello everyone. This is Khadija, and I'm here to introduce Karen. Karen is a compassion-focused leadership coach, coaching supervisor, and facilitator. She also leads a compassion-focused well-being practices. For the last 20 years as a leadership and personal coach, Karen has helped hundreds of clients in many different sectors with many leadership and personal challenges in order to achieve happiness, wellness, and success. All her coaching has had compassion-focused dimension to it. Karen's own history with the complex PTSD and the mental health suffering that is generated inspired Karen to develop an integrated program of compassion-focused practices to turn suffering for herself and for others into flourishing. Karen has many claims to fame. She has coached in front of 1.5 million people on the UK's most popular daytime program on ITV, UK Answer to the Oprah Show. Over 4 years, she wrote for Natural Health magazine as the sole doctor and the life coach, contributing a page addresser readers' life challenges every month. Millions have viewed her compassion-focused practices on BBC One and on international TV as far as South Korea. The pandemic was the catalyst for Karen to integrate the different strands of her work under the umbrella Compassion at Work. So now, Karen, I'm going to let you handle it from this on.
Thank you. So, welcome everyone. I'd like to start by just asking you how you are. And the purpose of that is to know what you're needing, if you like. How am I is a great question to ask yourself. So you might wish to reflect on how you are, and you may even wish to put into the chat how you are. And one way of answering that question is very simply a number out of 10. And a more, if you like, authentic way of answering that question is simply with a part of me is feeling maybe anxious, a part of me is feeling excited, a part of me is content. Depending on how sophisticated you wish to get to that question. So I'm going to give you a moment to reflect, and your choice, if you like, whether you wish to include that in the chat. But definitely reflect for yourself to know how you are. So I've got quite a lot to offer you in this webinar, and what I'd like to invite you to do is listen from the place of how is this relevant to me? How is this relevant to my organization? So you can get the most out of this webinar. So the first piece that I'd like to share with you is some facts that you may or may not know about leadership and compassion. And this comes from the Harvard Business Review. 91% of leaders said compassion is very important. 80% would like to enhance their compassion, but do not know how. There's quite a lot to learn about compassion. So what I'm going to cover in this webinar is I'm going to go through with you a little bit about the financial costs of mental health suffering and some early signs of poor mental health to be aware of. Other signs of suffering that impact well-being and productivity, not just mental health. I'm going to go through what compassion really is. I'm going to give you some evidence that demonstrates that compassion is so beneficial to well-being and productivity. I'm going to give you some starting points on how to learn to lead with compassion and practice self-compassion, even if you're skeptical now. And I'm going to share 2 success stories, compassion-focused, one from LinkedIn and one my own particular story. So starting with the financial costs, and this is from Deloitte's reports, and I'm just going to whiz through this. The first thing is the cost of poor mental health runs up to 45 billion a year, and this is pre-COVID. Who knows how big it is now? other pieces that Deloitte discovered, for each £1 spent on interventions, employers get back £5, and there are no downsides to investing. And if we prioritize well-being, we get improved productivity and decreased mental health absences and resignations. And the early interventions that we can include, such as supporting cultural change, give us the best return on investment. And some examples of early interventions are using coaching to develop compassion-focused leaders, using coaching to develop self-compassion, and also offering compassion-focused well-being. So, some early signs of poor mental health. And as you have a look at this list, I'm going to run through some of them. They're all relevant. This is from Bupa. What I'd like you to do is reflect on which forms of poor mental health do I personally experience? Which forms of poor mental health do my team experience? Do my colleagues experience? And actually, some of them we might not even be aware of. We don't necessarily know what our colleagues are experiencing unless they reveal them. So here are some of the signs, and you can see them there on the chart. I'm just going to mention 2 or 3. So poor concentration, low mood, lack of energy, difficulty with emotions. There are many different signs of poor mental health that we need to have our radar out and our antennae out, that we need to be aware of. And there's not just mental health suffering that impacts our productivity. Here are some other forms of suffering that we all experience as human beings some of the time. So as you look at these, again, have a reflection of which ones of these am I personally experiencing some of the time, maybe a lot of the time. Which ones have I seen in my colleagues? And which ones are happening outside of my conscious awareness? And that we may not know about them because they're outside our conscious awareness, but they're still impacting our the productivity of our organization. So what is a key answer? And one key answer response to this comes from the Dalai Lama, who tells us that compassion and love are not just nice to haves. They're not luxuries. It's what we need as to survive. And we know this going back to when we started in life. We need to experience this in order to be surviving as human beings. So moving on from here to look at what compassion at work is. And there are a number of different dimensions to this. The first one is about developing a compassion-focused culture. Secondly, developing compassion-focused leaders. Thirdly, having a culture where everyone in the organization is practicing self-compassion, and that comes in many different forms, how to practice self-compassion. Fourth one is giving opportunities, again, for everyone in the organization to engage in compassion-focused well-being practices. So I'm aware there's comments in the chat, and we can come to them later. And what I want to do now is tell you a little bit about my own personal story. So I have spent, actually now it's 20 years helping clients in my work as a leadership coach and personal coach, and also maybe 10 years helping clients through compassion-focused well-being. And I have been blessed with having a lot of success in terms of helping others. But it's only now recently, in a sense, since COVID, that I have spoken publicly about my own mental health challenges, which for masses of that time really caused a great deal of suffering, mental health suffering, because of a history of complex PTSD. And like anyone suffering, or many people who are suffering, I was looking for what were the pieces that would make the difference in my own personal journey. And it's not until I engaged in compassion practices for myself that my own, if you like, experiences of mental health suffering completely transformed. So I am a big advocate in my own life around the practices of compassion in order to support mental health and other forms of suffering. And I'm not simply a sample of one. There are many others who will testify to the value of compassion. And there has been so much research that has been done on the value of compassion, some of which I will share with you here and some of which I will share with you later. So what is self-compassion? And there are some keys to it. In very simple terms, the first key is about how we talk to ourselves, how we behave towards ourselves. Are we kind to ourselves, or are we giving ourselves a hard time, judging ourselves when we show up as human beings, when we make mistakes, when we do something that we judge as wrong, if you like? Are we kind, or are we judgmental? The second key is remembering that we are not alone with our suffering. We are part of the human race. Every human being experiences suffering. And whatever suffering we have going on at any point in time, there will be a whole bunch of others who are experiencing this same suffering. And I always find that really helpful to know I'm not the only one. And the third piece is about having the courage to feel our emotions. Now, many of us can get busy, get distracted, work hard, go out to the pub so that we don't have to feel our feelings. But the secret of self-compassion is having the courage to feel our feelings, because our feelings wish to be noticed and felt, so that we're no longer suppressing them, and we're no longer overwhelmed by them. And the beauty of feeling our feelings is that's connecting us with ourselves, and it's connecting us with each other. Provides a lot of information, actually. There are so many benefits of all of our emotions, and that's part of the practice of compassion. What is compassionate leadership? So the first piece of that is being aware of and sensitive to the well-being and the suffering of others. Now, others can make it easier for us by being authentic in responding to how you are as a question. Although quite often, and it's interesting, in the workplace and outside of the workplace, we want to hide our suffering, but there is value in being authentic and real. As compassionate leaders, we want to be able to offer appropriate empathy. We want to know what that empathy is, and it's different for each person. So we need to get quite sophisticated in our practice of compassionate leadership. And as we practice self-compassion, our ability to be non-judgmental of others increases. And we learn to offer support that's appropriate and empowering to others, and also supporting others to develop their own self-compassion, because not only do we as leaders need to be compassionate to our team. But we also need to practice our own self-compassion and to, if you like, support our team to practice their self-compassion. And the final piece is to be able to bring a compassionate approach to difficult feedback, difficult experiences, because we know that's part of the workplace and of life. So what are the benefits of the practices of compassion and the practices of compassionate leadership? And I have a lot of research which I will share with you later, but I'm just going to summarize here for you. The benefits are increased happiness and reduced mental health suffering, or you can eliminate it altogether. We also can reduce or eliminate self-criticism, increase resilience. We're less impacted by stress. We have better collaborations with our colleagues, more cooperation. We're less likely to overwork and burn out, and we just generally have more enjoyment in the workplace, and we feel like we belong and we fit in, and a more positive attitude and a better social connection. So it really impacts everything, and we can create an environment where work is a place, and the people we work with, because they are practicing compassion, is a place that we just love to be. And we can from there actually extend it into our personal life, but here we're talking about work. So I want from here to introduce you to Jeff Weiner, who was the CEO of LinkedIn. He is now the executive chairman of LinkedIn. And he here is chatting to CBS this morning about compassion. And let's have a listen to what they say.
I had never heard the term compassionate leadership until I met you and started reading about you. What is it exactly?
Compassionate management, compassionate leadership is about taking the time to put yourself in another person's shoes. I think within a company, a business, a team, I like to do that to help the other person achieve their objective or achieve what it is that you're trying to accomplish together more effectively.
Is it fair to say that compassionate leadership and compassion has always been your strong suit, Mr. Jeff Weiner? I was reading about you, they said, you know, he can be harsh. He used to be, his reputation. He was harsh, and he used his intelligence as a blunt instrument. That was hurtful. Is that a fair criticism of you?
Yeah, a word that you didn't mention I would have thrown in there for good measure as we're rattling off that list of things I could do better. Very intense, and the intensity wasn't always channeled in a constructive way. I'm still intense, but I'm more conscious of how to manifest that intensity more constructively.
In just 8 years, CEO Jeff Weiner has grown LinkedIn's small staff of 338 to over 11,000 employees in various offices around the world today. That's Jeff Weiner. He's one of the few CEOs I know that's gotten a 100% favorable rating from his employees in the past. And to show you something about how he operates, he had a $14 million stock bonus last year. Instead of taking it home to his wife and 2 gorgeous daughters, he put it in a company pool, put it back to the company pool so that
and they sold themselves to Microsoft for $19 billion.
Yes, yeah. Yep, 26 billion and counting, and that was a whole big secret that it didn't leak out because of he and Satya did that together.
Yeah,
So I just want to check, everyone's very quiet in the chat, that you could hear that. I'm going to have a little look at the chat. Can somebody post into the chat for me that you were able to hear that? Because perfect. Thank you, Barbara. I am delighted. So I'm going to go on, and I'm going to give Jeff another chance to share with us. Now, this is the results on the right of Jeff is a big fan of compassion, and he would put compassion down as his winning formula and the key piece that has enabled him to expand LinkedIn to 560 million members, grow revenue to 5 billion. And this is him talking to the graduates of the university where he graduated from many years ago. And he reveals the secret of his success. You probably know what he's going to say, but this is him speaking.
By virtue of my role at LinkedIn, I get the chance to speak with students and interns starting their careers just like you. One of the questions I'm most frequently asked is, what advice would I give my 22-year-old self? The advice I would give my 22-year-old self is to be compassionate. I wasn't very compassionate when I was your age. As a matter of fact, I wasn't particularly compassionate until the latter stage of my career. And if it weren't for learning the meaning and value of compassion, it's likely I wouldn't be on this stage today. So that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. The importance of being compassionate and how it can change your career path, your company, and your life. A journalist once described my management style at Yahoo as, quote, wielding his fierce intelligence as a blunt instrument. At least the first part was flattering. Though I wasn't a yeller, I was pretty intense. If I saw something in a presentation that didn't make sense, I could barrage the team with questions. I'd listen with the intent to reply and not seek to understand. I expected other people to do things the way I did and grew frustrated if they didn't. Over time, I realized how unproductive this approach was. Rather than inspire and lift people up, it was a good way to shut people down. So I decided to change. I vowed that as long as I'd be responsible for managing other people, I would aspire to manage compassionately. That meant pausing and being a spectator to my own thoughts, especially when getting emotional. It meant walking a mile in the other person's shoes and understanding their hopes, their fears, their strengths, and their weaknesses. And it meant doing everything within my power to set them up to be successful. I've now been practicing this approach for well over a decade, and I can tell you with absolute conviction that managing compassionately is not just a better way to build a team, it's a better way to build a company.
Interesting. Every time I hear that, I feel like, I find it really emotional. And I can't tell you how many times I've played that. So there's the tip. Practice, lead with compassion. To tell you a little bit more about LinkedIn, to complement their compassion-focused leadership program, in 2018, they created the role of head of mindfulness. The role is head of mindfulness and compassion. And that's about supporting employee emotional intelligence, resilience, and well-being. And the job description included mainstreaming mindfulness, which means that they're making mindfulness as a practice as important and as mainstream as physical exercise. And the second term, LinkedIn term, which is how to say the word, operationalizing compassion, meaning that training employees, every decision that they make to have compassion at the bedrock as part of it. So for you, how to develop a compassionate leadership and a compassion-focused culture, both. First piece is engaging in compassion-focused leadership coaching, and that would start with compassion-focused goal setting and compassion-focused visioning. And the second piece is engaging in compassion-focused well-being practices. And we really need both, because compassionate leadership needs the team to be practicing self-compassion too. So what I'm going to start with now is I'd like to give you a little taster very short, 3 or 4 minutes, not more, of a compassion-focused well-being practice. And it is a short meditation practice. It's perfect for those who know meditation, and it's perfect for those who are new to meditation. And if you find it challenging to follow along in a meditation or even in a presentation, one tip I learned a while ago is to simply repeat what you hear me say in your, either out loud, we're muted, or in your imagination. So you can experiment with that. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. And I'm going to invite you to feel your feet on the floor and to take a breath. And I'm going to invite you to take another breath. And I'd like you to bring into your consciousness a quality within yourself, a behavior within yourself, or a part of yourself that you appreciate, that you like. That's okay. You're okay with this part of yourself. Or you can bring in several, one or more. And just imagining this behavior, quality or part is appearing in some way, shape or form in front of you. Just imagining that. And I'd also like you to connect with your most loving self. Maybe your most loving self would normally give attention to a loved one, a child, another favorite human being, a favorite pet, someone in your life, or an activity or a place in nature that you love. I'd like you to direct now this love that you would bring to another perhaps, and start to direct this love to this quality, behavior or part that is in front of you, imagining it is. Imagine it's a separate being, whatever part of it is of you that you appreciate. And simply setting that intention to direct that love, that compassion to this part of yourself, this quality, this behavior. Just set that intention, pouring in that love and compassion that you might give to another and directing it to those qualities within yourself. And just taking a breath. Breathing in that compassion and love. And from here, I'd like you to connect again with that most loving internal source of love that goes often to others and maybe less often to your own system. And I'd like you to bring in front of you now some different parts, qualities or behaviors within yourself. Some that you find a little bit more challenging, tricky. Quality, a behavior, a part that perhaps you really secretly or not so secretly wish you didn't have. Maybe it's an angry part. Maybe it's a scared part. Maybe it's an inadequate part. Any part. And simply being open to the notion that this quality, this part, is there to serve you, even if it doesn't make any sense right now. And is also calling out to receive your compassion, your love, as if it was a small child. an angry part, a scared part, often is within the inner child that is within each of us. I'd like you to open up to connect that loving, compassionate self and direct that to that quality, that part within, and just allowing that part to receive. So you are becoming both the giver of love and compassion and the receiver. And just take a moment to breathing in that compassion, that love. Just breathe it in. And then you can very slowly, in your own time, come back into the room. Now, I'm curious to know how that was, so you can maybe post in the chat or just to know how that was for you. But just because of time, I'm going to move on, but just know how that was for you. Maybe it was easy, maybe it was challenging if you're new, but that is a practice that has a great track record in supporting compassion. I'm going to go from here to talk about compassion-focused leadership coaching program. And what you can see on this particular slide is some compassion-focused coaching that I have co-created with various clients over the years. On the left, when I start a coaching program with clients, I'll normally invite them into compassion-focused personal goals and compassion-focused leadership goals. So if we just look at the top on the right-hand side, the way I would do this process, the way I do this process with clients is I invite them to create a goal in the area of leadership. So if you look at the first one at the top right, the particular client there, his goal was about feeling happy and authentic, being a compassion-focused MD. Now, he would have started that from a place of not feeling happy and not feeling authentic and not being a compassion-focused MD. So that starts the process, and the way I would create these goals is I invite them to create something that is inspiring and is a 10 for inspiration. And that is, I have learned over many years, that is the most effective way of creating a goal. We co-create together until we have words that are as inspiring as they can be. And those are great facilitators of the outcome, the goal creation process. And then from there, we move into a visioning process. And what that is about is, again, another really powerful part of the coaching process. And it's multi-sensory. So again, I invite clients to create a vision of how their workplace will be when they have achieved their compassion-focused leadership goal and their compassion-focused personal goal. So to create it from many different perspectives, multi-sensory, how are they feeling? What are they experiencing? How are their team being? And that is another great facilitator. So those are the first two pieces of a coaching program. I will tell you more about how a coaching program works in another conversation, but I want to move on from here to share with you. Let's imagine a situation where you have created your compassion-focused goals. You have created your compassion-focused vision. You have engaged in coaching to develop your compassion-focused leadership skills. And the result is you and your leaders are now all compassion-focused leaders with their own individual compassion-focused leadership style. The second result is your organization is now a compassion-focused culture where everyone is practicing self-compassion and compassion towards others. And the impact on your productivity and mental well-being is large, as well as the impact on the recruitment and retention of top talent. And not just that, everyone that your organization is coming into contact is benefiting. Your suppliers, your clients, because you are all compassionate beings full of all the benefits that I outlined earlier on. So how can you enable your leaders to develop their own compassion-focused style? Two ways. The first way is to engage in a group coaching program which is specifically designed for your organization to address your challenges and your needs. Every organization is different. Every organization has different challenges and different needs. There are areas of commonality. And also the second option is to have your senior leadership team also to be engaging in developing their own compassion-focused leadership style. The beauty of LinkedIn is it was started with Jeff Weiner, and then it was rolled out through the organization. So what is the goal of compassion-focused coaching? So the end result is about productivity and reducing suffering, mental health suffering. And as human beings, we also have plenty of other forms of suffering, not just mental health suffering. We all know that, just reflecting on our own lives. And as the program is about developing self-compassion practices, supporting the development of those, and the practical application of compassionate leadership practices. And what that is, as I've already mentioned, but just to recap, an awareness and sensitivity to the well-being and suffering of others, looking at different ways of being empathic, different ways of being non-judgmental, and different ways of offering appropriate and empowering support. And there's quite some subtle nuances to that. And finding a compassionate approach to difficult decisions, difficult choices, and difficult actions. And how to support the development of a compassion-focused culture. What I'm offering is SelfCompassion weekly workshop program and a compassion-focused well-being program, which is the practices of compassion-focused well-being. And I'm offering to include that at no cost to the first 3 organizations who choose to enroll in a compassion-focused leadership program following this webinar. And these sessions are live sessions. And I'll tell you a little bit more in the next slide. So really, in an ideal world, they are for all staff and all leaders. They are offered to all staff and to all leaders. And the SelfCompassion weekly workshop program is about learning how to use self-compassion, because that is a skill set and it's not something that so many people practice, because we don't learn it. It's not taught in schools, although in the US they're bringing it in, and maybe it will be taught in our schools at some point soon. So that's the Self-Compassion weekly workshop program that's live, and the practices of compassion. And I have a repertoire of compassion-focused meditation and movement sessions, which I offer in the daytime. And then I offer relax and sleep sessions, and they're all about supporting well-being. And they're quite creative and fun. And I offer a repertoire of different practices, because different practices suit different people and different practices suit at different times. Moving on. So a recap, reminding us that compassionate work is about building a compassion-focused culture. It's about compassion-focused leadership development. It's about developing self-compassion practices, and it's about engaging in compassion-focused well-being. So what's next? What I'd like to offer for those of you who would like to have had their appetite whet and would like to find out more, and a completely obligation-free conversation, very much a chat. Is this for you? Isn't it for you? From a place of, although I have a practice of compassion and I have a passion for compassion, it isn't the right choice for everyone or for every organization right now, depending on where you are. But if it feels like it's a good choice for you, I want to offer you this conversation and to give you some greater insight into the challenges you're experiencing and how they're impacting your organization, because some of them may be happening outside your conscious awareness. We can chat, and we can give you some answers to questions you might have, and just have a conversation. Is this a good choice for you? Is it good for you now, as in soon? Is it good for you later? Is there other work you need to do in the meantime? Or maybe something else is a better option for you. So if you would like to chat, if you're attracted by what you've heard, if you envisage your leaders would be, now some of them will be, some of them will be a bit more skeptical. It's like introducing anything new. If you know or you suspect your team's well-being is suffering, and if your productivity is down or not where you want it to be, or if you're doing okay and you would like to sustain this or do even better, it's a great preventative. I'm going to invite you to drop me an email. We can put into the chat, Kajia's going to put into the chat my email address, and just say, let's talk compassion. And what I'm going to do now is give some time for questions. And I'm conscious there may be a whole bunch of things in the chat that I haven't seen. What I think I'm going to do, I can stop share. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So now I can see. So if you have a question you would like to ask on any of this, and you may have put them in the chat, and Kajia, maybe if there are some questions that you can see that I can't, you can put them into the bottom of the chat. Any questions you have for me now, I'm really happy to answer anything that you would like to ask. And I'm aware that we have had questions before. Yeah, let me just see. So these are the questions we've had before. So we can start with these. and then we'll give you some ideas of other questions that you might like to have for us to answer. So yeah, we've had a question now about from leaders struggling with dealing with team members being bullies, and how that can sit alongside disciplinary issues and compassion. And what I have said in before is, when we have someone who is bullying, then what we know is they are themselves suffering, because a happy, content person is not normally bullying. So we need to understand, we can offer compassion to them. What is it that's going on for them? What is causing their suffering that is causing them to behave in this way? Because they will also have a part within themselves that likely knows that the practice of bullying is not a way that they would probably want to be behaving, or would want to be behaving a different way. So we can either offer them support as a leader to understand their suffering, or we can redirect them to some professional support, which in itself is an act of compassion. And trusting that this, our support as leaders and the professional support can make a difference so that they are no longer bullying. And also, if we do need to resort to disciplinary issues, then we can learn to do that in a way that is done with a compassionate approach. So we've had questions before around what kinds of organizations are suitable and appropriate for compassion at work. And the answer is those organizations who are attracted to it, or those teams who we can start with a team that is attracted to compassion, because we can then be the team who is practicing compassion, and then we can model the impact, because we can measure the impact of any intervention, and we can see the impact it has on our sphere of influence. So that would be a starting point for compassion. Kaja, any other questions that we have had that have come in that we can offer? Can you see?
Yeah, if we have resistant colleagues who are skeptical, how would you suggest we enroll them in compassion?
So a couple of answers for that. One is they might like to attend a presentation of this ilk. The second answer would be that we can start within our field of influence, our sphere of influence, and then they can start to see the benefits directly. And so when we want to introduce any intervention of any kind in any field into our organization, we really ideally want to start with those who are receptive and attracted to it, because it's often more effective with people who are open. Although interestingly, sometimes we can work with those who are skeptical, and it can be really effective as well, but it depends on the level of resistance. Did we have were there any other questions that I missed?
Yes. If we are interested in compassion at work as an organization, would it make great sense for us to start with compassionate leadership, learning to practice self-compassion, or engaging in compassion-focused well-being, or do all concurrently?
Well, in an ideal world, we do everything concurrently, but normally organizations are more inclined to start with one, And the starting point would be wherever the organization feels more drawn to start. Might often be in the area of compassionate leadership. And then the leaders who are practicing compassionate leadership then also model at the same time self-compassion. So it depends on each organization and what the organization is feels drawn to start with. Were there any other questions anyone else would like to ask?
Yes.
We had gone.
The last one is, when would you practice self-compassion?
Okay. Well, the biggest difference happens if we practice self-compassion. Every moment life presents us with an opportunity to practice self-compassion. Any challenge, any source of pain is if you like, a catalyst to say, yeah, you know, when we have a dripping tap in our kitchen, we can ignore it. But if the water is flooding into our kitchen, we cannot ignore it. The same is true in our own worlds, our business world, our life. If we're suffering more, then we're motivated to practice self-compassion. So that is a gift, if you like, of suffering. Suffering is the school of compassion. However, if we practice compassion, whether or not we're suffering, then it's a preventative. Like we find that the suffering we experience as human beings is smaller, less frequent, and our resilience grows. We don't have to try to grow our resilience, it just grows. So so every day and every moment, when we're not directly focusing on a task, or we're practicing compassion, and even if we are focusing on a task, we can practice it in a compassionate way. How can I make this task more, if it's not the task that I love doing, sometimes we have to do tasks that we don't love doing. How can I make it more compassionate to me? So have we covered all the questions now? We have?
Yeah, Barbara also mentioned that she was very oddly emotional, but she find it challenging to assign compassion to her less desirable qualities. So,
of course, it's challenging because we haven't learned how to do that. And the more we practice it, the more we learn to see the gifts of our challenging qualities and how they are serving us, the easier it becomes. And if we're open to the notion that every part is a vital part in the system. I personally have struggled with my angry part, but only this week I had a conversation with my angry part. This is another self-compassion practice, and really saw how my angry part is a vital part in my system and has its rightful place in my system, and that allows me to welcome and practice and welcome that part. So but we get better at it with practice, and that's how it works. So one more message. So I've seen it. That's all. I've seen that. So shall we put as the last piece into the chat? Kadja, if people would like to chat with me, can we put my contact details? Really happy to chat to everyone, anyone, from a place of, complete, can I support you to learn more, practice more, engage more? I would love to do that. In the meantime, oh, thank you. I've just seen, looking at the chat now. Serish, oh, I'm glad. It's lovely to read that. I will send a recording. I will send some research, other information that I believe will be of value to you. And yeah, my mission is to have a compassionate world, because we need it, hey? Well, I believe we need it. So I feel quite moved saying that. Thank you all so much for joining me. We are complete. So, and with 2 minutes to spare, pat on back. Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, the world needs that. As the Beatles said, what the world needs now is love, sweet love. They are linked, compassion and love. Lovely to meet you all. Thank you for joining me. I hope we can talk again. Until we meet again, we are now complete. Sending you much love and much compassion. Have a beautiful day. Take care. See you. Bye for now.